My wife cheated while I worked overtime to save for our first house, so I signed the divorce papers and took everything quietly. I'm a 30-year-old guy who always believed that hard work and loyalty were the cornerstones of a solid marriage. I didn't grow up with much, so I learned early on that nothing comes easy unless you earn it. Sweat, time, patience. When I met Rachel, she said she loved that about me, that I was dependable, grounded. We moved into a tiny one-bedroom after the wedding. Thin walls, leaky faucet, secondhand furniture, but I didn't mind. It felt like the beginning of something we'd build together. I worked full-time at a warehouse during the day and delivered groceries 3 nights a week. Saturdays were my only real downtime, and even then, I'd pick up overtime when it was offered. Every extra dollar went into our house fund. I tracked expenses religiously, canceled my gym membership, and stopped eating out, just to speed things along. Rachel didn't complain. She'd kiss my cheek when I came home tired and say, "You're amazing," before going back to whatever show she was watching. But somewhere in that second year, I started noticing small shifts. She seemed more distracted. Our conversations grew shorter. She stopped asking how my day was. I chalked it up to stress. Maybe she was overwhelmed at work or feeling cooped up in our small place. I reminded myself not to read into it. People go through phases. Still, every time I packed lunch instead of buying it, every time I said no to a night out or skipped sleep to drive across town for an extra delivery, I did it with the image of our future home burned into my mind. I believed love wasn't just words, it was sacrifice. And I genuinely thought we were in this together. At the time, I had no idea how alone I really was. At first, it was just small things. Rachel started coming home later, saying she had to stay behind for team catch-ups or quarterly reviews. I didn't question it. I mean, I was working crazy hours too, so who was I to judge her hustle? But the timing always felt off. She'd come in way after dinner, makeup still fresh, no sign of exhaustion. I'd be sitting there in my work boots, eating reheated leftovers, trying not to feel like I was being left behind in my own marriage. One night I asked if everything was okay. She looked up from her phone and said, "Yeah, I'm just tired. Work's been a lot lately." Her tone was sharp, defensive, like I had accused her of something instead of just checking in. I apologized immediately, told her I wasn't trying to push, but the moment passed with no warmth. Later, I heard her laughing in the bedroom while texting someone. When I walked in, she locked her screen. Still, I told myself to trust her. I mean, this was Rachel, my wife. The person who used to send me random "I love you" texts during my lunch breaks and make midnight grilled cheeses when we couldn't sleep. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe this was just how relationships evolve over time. Less spark, more survival. But even then, deep down, something didn't sit right. There's a difference between being tired and being emotionally checked out. I could feel the distance between us growing, like a draft under a locked door. And no matter how hard I worked to keep the roof over our heads and the future moving forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that Rachel was quietly slipping away. I just didn't know how far she'd already gone. It was a rainy Tuesday when I noticed the bank alert. I was on my lunch break, sitting in the back of the warehouse with a soggy sandwich, checking our savings account like I always did. That's when I saw it. $2, $500 gone. Transferred out of our joint house fund into an unfamiliar account. My heart dropped. I refreshed the screen twice, hoping it was a glitch. It wasn't. That night, I brought it up gently. "Hey, did you move money from our savings?" Rachel barely looked up from her laptop. "Yeah," she said casually. "My cousin needed help. He's going through something, and I figured we could spare it." I just stared at her, trying to process the fact that she'd taken thousands without even asking me. She rolled her eyes. "It's not like we're broke, and I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd make it a big deal." I didn't even know she had a cousin who needed help, but I swallowed my frustration and said, "Okay, just please talk to me next time. That money's for our future." She nodded, gave me a peck on the cheek, and went back to typing like it was nothing. Meanwhile, I was lying awake that night staring at the ceiling, mentally calculating how many more shifts I'd need to make up the difference. Still, I let it go. Maybe I was being too controlling. Maybe she did just want to help family. I didn't want to become one of those paranoid, bitter husbands who tracks every dime. I wanted to believe she respected what we were building, that the house fund actually meant something to her too. But after that night, the seed of doubt had taken root, and I couldn't unsee how easily she made choices without me. It was a stupid accident that pulled the thread loose. I was doing laundry one Sunday. Her jeans were stuffed in the hamper, pockets still full. I reached in and pulled out a crumpled receipt, thinking it was gum or a shopping list. But it wasn't. It was from a hotel bar downtown. 2 entrees, champagne, and a dessert platter. The timestamp was from last Thursday. The same night, she told me she had to work late for a product launch. I stared at that receipt for a long time. My mind tried to reason with it. Maybe she met a friend. Maybe it was a work dinner. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. When I asked her about it later, she barely blinked. Oh yeah? I had dinner with Serena from HR. She was going through a breakup, and I figured some bubbly would help. What's the big deal? Her answer came so smoothly, it was almost believable. But her eyes didn't match the ease in her voice. They flickered, just for a second. I said nothing. I nodded and pretended to accept it. But that night, while she scrolled through TikToks in bed, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if Serena from HR even existed. I started noticing other things too. Her sudden obsession with the gym, new lingerie tags in the trash, perfume she never wore around me. When I offered to pick her up from work one night, she insisted, too quickly, that she'd already called a ride. I didn't have proof. Not yet. But my gut was screaming. That receipt sat in my wallet for days, folded, creased, soaked in suspicion. And every time I touched it, I felt one step closer to a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The breaking point didn't come from Rachel. It came from her best friend, Danny, who always had a loose mouth when she drank. We were at a casual dinner, just the 4 of us, me, Rachel, Danny, and her boyfriend Chris. It was meant to be low-key, a chance to catch up, but Rachel spent most of the night glued to her phone, barely touching her food. Danny, on the other hand, was already on her second glass of wine and talking louder than necessary. Out of nowhere, she laughed and said, "Remember that weekend you guys went to that cabin upstate? That place was way nicer than the one we went to." My fork froze midair. "What cabin?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Danny looked confused, then glanced at Rachel. Rachel's face went pale. "Oh, I meant the work retreat," Danny mumbled, clearly realizing she'd messed up. Rachel jumped in immediately. "Yeah, it was super last minute. I didn't want to bother you with the details." I nodded slowly, pretending to accept the explanation, but inside, my heart was pounding like a war drum. There was no work retreat. There had never been a cabin upstate. She'd lied, and Danny, without meaning to, had just cracked the surface. That night, I didn't say a word as we drove home. Rachel filled the silence with empty comments about how nice the food was. I kept my hands on the wheel, my face calm. But inside, a switch had flipped. I was done wondering. I was done waiting for the truth to fall into my lap. If she wasn't going to give it to me, I'd find it myself. Quietly, carefully, without tipping her off. I waited until she fell asleep. Rachel always passed out quickly, especially after a couple glasses of wine. That night, her breathing evened out within minutes, and I slipped out of bed like a ghost. My hands were shaking as I grabbed her phone from the nightstand and walked into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I'd never done this before. I hated the idea of snooping, but something inside me said this was the only way I'd get the truth. She had no password, just a lazy swipe. I opened her gallery and scrolled, heart pounding, lips dry. That's when I saw them, photos from the cabin. Except it wasn't a group trip. It was just her and him, posing together in front of a fireplace, wrapped in matching robes. Her smile was effortless, glowing. She looked like someone I hadn't seen in months, carefree, adored, happy. I felt sick. There were more. A video of them clinking glasses on a balcony. A blurry photo of a bed with rose petals. Selfies of her kissing his cheek. I clicked into her messages. His name was saved under a fake contact, something boring like Amy HR. I scrolled through endless texts. "I miss you already. He's working late again. Maybe I'll come over after." And the one that shattered whatever dignity I had left. "He's too focused on our future to notice I'm living mine now." I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger yet. Just numbness. Like the air had been sucked out of the world, and all I could hear was blood rushing in my ears. I put the phone back exactly where I found it, crawled into bed beside her, and stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night, listening to her breathe, wondering how many lies she told me with that same mouth. The next morning, I kissed her forehead like nothing had changed. She smiled, groggy, and said, "Love you," before rolling over. I stared at her for a moment, memorizing the face of someone I no longer recognized. That day at work, I didn't lift boxes or clock overtime. I sat in my car on my lunch break, Googling divorce attorneys. My hand still shook, but it wasn't from heartbreak anymore. It was from restraint. I didn't confront her. That would have given her control, let her manipulate the narrative. Instead, I opened a new bank account in my name only and began quietly moving funds over, small enough amounts to avoid suspicion. I called the bank and had her removed as a secondary on our house fund account. She never noticed. I even smiled more, asked about her day, acted like I was finally relaxing. She seemed relieved, like maybe I'd stopped suspecting. I told her I was working late more often, but I was meeting with a lawyer. Turns out infidelity combined with misuse of marital funds gave me leverage, more than I'd imagined. I documented everything, the texts, the photos, even the fake contact name. I took screenshots, backed up her entire phone to a secure drive, and made copies. Every detail was cataloged like evidence in a case. Rachel had no idea. She still laughed with that same easy confidence, still posted filtered selfies with captions like, "Grateful for this life." And I let her. Because by then, I wasn't trying to save the marriage. I was preparing the exit. She didn't know the man she slept beside each night was already gone. She didn't know I'd stopped being her husband the moment I saw her kiss him in that photo. And I didn't plan on telling her until it was too late. It was a Thursday evening, one of those dull, overcast nights where the sky looks like wet concrete. I came home early, on purpose. I wanted to see her face when she wasn't expecting me. Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a glass of wine half finished. She looked up, startled. Then she smiled like nothing was wrong and said, "Hey, you're home early." I sat down across from her and waited. She closed the laptop slowly and sighed, like she had rehearsed it 100 times. "I think we need a break," she said. I don't know who I am anymore. You're always working, and I feel like we've become strangers. I need time to figure out what I want." Her voice trembled, but not with sadness. More like nerves. I didn't flinch. I just nodded and asked, "What kind of break?" She looked surprised. "Like space, maybe a few weeks apart. Maybe we sell the house fund and split it, just so we both have breathing room." That's when it hit me. She wasn't just emotionally gone. She was already planning her exit, with my money, after months of cheating. And somehow, she thought I'd still play the fool on my way out. That moment broke me, not in the way I expected. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just looked at the woman across the table and realized how far gone she already was. She wasn't confused. She wasn't searching for herself. She was just done pretending. And for the first time, I stopped pretending too. I told her, "Okay, if that's what you want, I won't stop you." She smiled, almost relieved. She didn't know I was already 3 steps ahead. The next morning, I left before sunrise and drove straight to my lawyer's office. The papers were ready, meticulously prepared, every clause airtight. We'd finalized everything the night before: the evidence of infidelity, the financial deceit, the timeline, the documentation. All of it gave me full leverage to protect what was mine. I signed the divorce papers with a steady hand. There was no sadness left in me, just cold clarity. When I got home, Rachel was still in her robe, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. I laid the manila envelope on the kitchen counter and said, "You've got mail." She looked up, confused, then opened it. Her face drained of color as she flipped through page after page. Divorce filing, financial disclosures, evidence packets. She froze on one of the screenshots, a photo of her and him wrapped in that hotel bed, time-stamped and tagged. "What is this?" she whispered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just said, "You wanted a break. I'm giving you a permanent one." She started crying, cursing, gasping out fragmented excuses. It didn't mean anything. I was lonely. You were never home. But the show was over. I told her I'd frozen the house fund, removed her from the accounts, and that the lawyer would be in touch. She tried to grab my arm, but I stepped back. Her family called later that day, concerned, defensive, confused. I sent them everything. Screenshots, receipts, texts. They went silent. I packed a single bag and left that evening, while she sat stunned at the kitchen table. The same place where she'd planned to leave me. Only now, the roles were reversed. She thought she'd orchestrated the ending, but I was the one who wrote the final chapter. I moved into a short-term rental the same night I left. It wasn't much: bare walls, stiff carpet, a faint smell of paint. but it felt cleaner than anything I'd breathed in for months. The silence was strange at first. No passive-aggressive sighs from the bedroom. No late-night whispering on her phone. No secondhand guilt hanging in the air. Just me, a suitcase, and a mattress that didn't know my history. I should have felt free. But instead, the emptiness wrapped around me like a cold towel. The text started almost immediately. "Can we talk? Please don't do this." I messed up. I didn't reply. I didn't know her closure. She'd made peace with losing me long before I found out the truth. A day later, she showed up outside my building, mascara smudged and panicked. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she cried. "We can fix us." I kept my voice level. "There is no us, Rachel. You ended that months ago." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. Then her lover's wife found out, because apparently Rachel wasn't the only one cheating in that scenario. Word spread fast in his workplace. He got suspended pending investigation. Rachel's job found out too, since some of their little hotel getaways happened during supposed client meetings. HR launched a review. Suddenly, she wasn't the one in control anymore. And I watched it unfold from a distance, detached, like someone observing a storm from inside a locked car. My family and friends were shocked. Some tried to comfort me, but I didn't want pity. I just wanted distance from everything that carried her fingerprints. Nights were quiet, sometimes painfully so, but they were honest. For the first time in years, my life didn't feel like a performance. Still, beneath that calm surface, something darker simmered, a lingering ache, a bruise that hadn't faded yet. And it was about to get worse before it got better. The first few weeks alone felt like learning how to breathe again after being underwater for too long. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text Rachel out of habit before remembering there was no reason to. The silence that once felt cold slowly started feeling peaceful. I woke up without tension in my shoulders. I went to sleep without wondering who she was messaging. Still, there were nights when the loneliness hit harder than I'd admit. Nights when the betrayal replayed in my mind like a movie I didn't want tickets to. I threw myself into rebuilding. Real rebuilding. I bought new shirts that actually fit instead of the clearance ones I used to settle for. I tried cooking again, burned the first few meals, but it felt good to mess up without someone rolling her eyes. I even went back to the gym for short morning workouts, the smell of rubber mats and metal weights grounding me in a way I didn't expect. Marcus checked in almost daily. He never said, "I told you so." He just showed up with takeout and listened when I needed it. On weekends, I drove to open houses, not to buy yet, but to walk through spaces that felt like possibility. Clean walls, bright windows, no secrets hiding in the corners. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about choosing a future that wasn't built on lies. Each time I stepped through a doorway, I pictured a life where I didn't have to work myself to exhaustion just to feel worthy. A life where my loyalty wasn't a weakness waiting to be exploited. Therapy helped too, slowly, painfully, learning that I wasn't stupid or blind. I was trusting, and she took advantage of that. I wasn't broken. I was exhausted. One night, as I stood in my empty living room, staring at the city lights through cheap blinds, something inside me shifted. For the first time, the future didn't scare me. But there was still one last thing I needed to do before I could close this chapter for good. It happened late on a Sunday night, the kind of quiet where the whole world feels paused. I was sitting at my small dining table, laptop open, cursor blinking on a blank page. I didn't plan it. I didn't rehearse it. I just felt this sudden need to unload everything I'd been carrying, everything Rachel had carved into me. So I started typing. Not to her, not really. More like to the ghost of who she used to be, or the version of her I wished had been real. I wrote for nearly an hour. I told her how her betrayal hadn't just ended our marriage. It had gutted the future I spent years breaking my body to build. I wrote, "You didn't cheat on a man who ignored you. You cheated on a man who worked himself into the ground to give you a life you didn't have to fight for." I admitted the things I never said out loud, the nights I cried in the car after long shifts, the mornings I forced myself up because I believed she was worth the sacrifice. And then I wrote the part that surprised even me. "Thank you. Because losing you brought me back to myself." The moment I typed the final sentence, I felt something loosen inside my chest, some knot I didn't even realize had been strangling me. I hovered over the send button. I could have emailed it. I could have texted it. I could have poured salt into every wound she was licking right now. Instead, I hit delete. Every word vanished, and with it, the last piece of her that still lived in me. A month later, I closed on a small but beautiful townhome. Not the big dream house I once envisioned, but something better, mine. My hands shook when I turned the key for the first time. Not from sadness, from peace. From the quiet thrill of a life rebuilt on my own terms. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and for the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't look back.